Hello, hello. It is 2 o'clock, so I say we go ahead and get started. This is Sarah Richmond, Director of Marketing at Above the Tree Line. I have on the line with me Joe Upton, our VP of Business Development. Are you there, Joe?
I'm here. Thank you,
All
Sarah.
right. Well, we're actually not in the same office today, but we are both calling in from Ann Arbor, Michigan, where it is a beautiful spring day. And we have a rather large group, so we do have the lines muted, but we are going to try to make every effort to get back to everyone individually if we're not able to answer your questions during the session. So do feel free to enter questions or chat anytime. If we don't get to it, you will hear from me afterwards. So we'll go ahead and get started. We are here today to talk about all the ways to market new titles. And I think really, because 100% of the major US publishers post their catalogs in Edelweiss, and it holds about 95% of the US front list, we see a lot of different ways that publishers promote their new titles. And everyone's approach is a little bit different, maybe a lot different. It depends some on the particular audience, oftentimes quite a bit on the budget, but also just on the team, the publisher team, and what has worked for them in the past, what their experience has been, what's within their comfort zone. So there's lots of different ways to promote titles before they're published and after they're published. And our goal today is just to share lots of ideas, give some examples, hopefully some that maybe you haven't considered before or you just haven't tried before, and maybe you leave with a few new ideas and tips and tricks up your sleeve for the next season. So in the interest of time, you see we're going to try to cover a lot today. We're not going to do a deep dive into any one of these. But if you want to know how to do any of these, pretty much all of them are located. There's a how-to guide out on our help site. And of course, you can always let us know if you have questions too. We're happy to help. Um, so let's get started. We're going to start just within the catalog, catalog and the title listings in Edelweiss. There's a lot that can be done here, and most of it's actually at no additional cost to you, and perhaps just a little bit more effort, a little bit more coordination between your team. I am making an assumption here that a lot of the folks, if not all the folks listening, currently are subscribers to the catalog service in Edelweiss. It may not be the case, but for those of you that do, you know some of these basic benefits. Just having your titles posted where people are searching for new titles is just helpful on its own. But in addition to that, it also provides a lot of benefits for your sales reps. It makes it easier for them to communicate about new titles to their accounts or to their contacts, especially those I think that independent reps that they sell for multiple publishers. It's important to have them in the same place as everybody else. So we're going to talk about a couple things that sales reps can do in particular a little bit later, but first let's dig into things that you can do to really make your titles pop in Edelweiss. So first things first, enhancing just the basic title listing. In general, the more data you include, the more helpful the listing is. That sounds really obvious, but actually we see a lot of variety in the amount of data that different publishers put out on Edelweiss, so it's worth mentioning. The more data you include, the more helpful that listing is for potential buyers or reviewers. It also makes it more likely that they're going to take action. So the more complete title data that you include, including marketing data, that's sometimes the most left out, or related resources, including all of that just increases the likelihood of people finding your title, but also purchasing it. The book professionals that are creating orders, particularly in Edelweiss, they're really busy people and they're talking to lots of reps. They're looking at tons of catalogs. So the more you include in here, the more time you're saving them. So add in things like PDFs of illustrations, especially for children's books. That's really helpful. Add in marketing plans that will save them time and kind of show them that this is a great title to buy and you're making their job easier. And definitely author information. That's another thing that is sometimes missing from title listings. And actually one thing that I guess we released not too long ago, it's kind of a fun way to enhance a title listing is to include a video. So if you have a book trailer or a GIF or a author interview, sometimes we see those as well. That just kind of helps draw attention to the title as well. And I guess probably another often overlooked option is to take advantage of all the reviews in Edelweiss, particularly for those that have a review copy for their pre-publication title. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when you have lots of reviews in Edelweiss, and especially the ones that are really great, maybe those librarians, they put a lot of effort into that review. It's a wonderful review. Go in and feature it so that people looking at your title can find it really easily. Catalog administrators can do this in the admin area of Edelweiss. So another way to drive orders and just attention for your pre-publication titles is comps and related products. And I bet a lot of you listening are pretty familiar with these, but it's worth mentioning because they're super helpful for generating pre-publication orders in particular. So comps, if you're not familiar, are comparable titles. So these are titles that you expect this book to perform like sales-wise. Another term for this might be model title. So book buyers, again, they consider thousands of books. They don't have a lot of time to do a lot of research. Sometimes they just don't like to do a lot of research either. So it's in your best interest to provide relevant sales data that really helps them make decisions and overall makes them happier. Happier buyers are more likely to purchase your products or talk about your products or review your products. So the ideal number of comps, though, is important. That's worth mentioning. It's easy to kind of go overboard, but if you have more than a dozen, it's actually not too helpful for a buyer. So try to stick to 1 to 5. When we talk to bookstore buyers about what's most helpful in comps, they say number 1 priority, any book by the same title and the same author. Just kind of help them know if this is a related title or author to something they've seen before. Is what titles have been most recently published. So pulling up a title from 20 years ago isn't so helpful for them, but a more recent one that they probably have sales data they can look at is really helpful. Any books that are in the same format, and then books by other authors. That's oftentimes, I think, where we see publishers focus is trying to find similar books to other authors, and they kind of leave out those first few that are actually really important for buyers. Related products, on the other hand, are viable titles that you as a publisher offer that are related to the catalog title, or maybe they're potential upsells or add-on sales. They could be displays or dump bins that include the title, could include previous titles by that author in the same series. That's super helpful. A same title, another format, maybe an ebook, audiobook, library edition. Maybe a relevant titles like if you like this, you might also like that. Free marketing materials, that's a great thing to include here if it exists. All of this information is just useful for book professionals that are considering purchasing the title. So this is actually, oh, Joe, were you going to jump in?
Nope, sorry, you're doing very well.
Okay, sorry, I heard a question there. Feel free to interrupt me anytime. Showcases, I love showcases. So if you want to list those related products kind of in a way that pops more, so I'm a marketing person, I like when things are pretty and visual. Showcases are a great way to do that. You might know them as marketing collections. We called them that in our last version of Edelweiss. But this is a way for you to say, hey, these are backlist titles from the same author, or related titles that you might want to display or kind of purchase or organize in the same way. And it's just a really pretty way to do that. So I'm moving quickly here, and events is something that doesn't always apply, but I thought it was worth mentioning here because they are so great at generating pre-publication buzz, and then of course, as you know, after publication as well. Author tours just really spark new orders of a title. Lots of publishers add their event grids, as we call them, in Edelweiss, and this just provides an interactive way to collect those event proposals and bids for the touring authors. So basically what happens, if you're not familiar with it, publicity admins in Edelweiss can provide a list of all your touring authors, including their tentative tour stops, any other information you want to provide as well. And then your accounts, your contacts at the accounts, are then able to make a request. So they submit a proposal, and what's really helpful is they also put in expected attendance and expected sales. So it gives you a feel for whether that stop or that visit on the tour would really help generate some buzz for the title. So all of those ways to enhance your title listings are just included in your normal catalog service subscriptions. They're just sort of best practices we see. I bet as I went through those, you say, oh, we do that, or we do that for a couple titles, maybe not all the titles, or I'm always forgetting to do that. Totally normal, but definitely when you have that, it sets a strong foundation for generating that buzz for your titles. It also makes it easier for reps to sell those titles. So reps can build on those efforts by adding their own perspective and their own personal knowledge of their accounts to make it even more likely that an order is going to be placed. So there's 4 elements to a markup in case you're not a sales rep, you're not as familiar to this part of the process. But a markup to the catalog, there's 4 things. One is priority. Of course, you can't mark everything in the catalog as high priority, but they want to draw attention to a couple titles for that store, maybe something that has a local author or something that has sold well in the past or they think is really going to sell well. They can draw attention to it with priority. You can see if you highlight it, it shows up in yellow for the buyer as well. Tags are another thing that are super helpful for buyers. So reps can go in and tag local authors or a special promotion or rep favorites. We see that a lot too. And of course, notes, this is where, sales reps can get really personal and they know their accounts so well. Maybe they also have information that they're privy to that's not actually in the listing itself, and that's where they can add that in. And then comps, so publishers can enter in comps, but then sales reps can draw attention to a couple of those, and they can also add in their own as well. So bookstore buyers love markups. It really helps. Again, it's all about making their process faster. They love it when markups include things like the print run or the sell through for prior editions, or maybe there was a paperback or a reissue or a new edition. Maybe it's a large print or audiobook, just making it really easy for them to discover these things. Another thing that is a pretty nice best practice, if the book is in Spanish or another language, it's nice to list the title in English. All of these things that can just personalize the catalog for those buyers and make it more likely, again, that they're going to purchase those titles. And one last thing related to catalogs, and that is really the only thing here that is not included in the normal subscription, because this is a banner ad basically. Inserts are basically catalog banners. They're located in Edelweiss. They show up right above the title listing. If you don't do this yourself, but if you look around at a lot of other publisher catalogs, you'll see this. This is a really popular thing for folks to do. They cost $300, which is pretty cheap for an advertisement, at least the advertising I do as a marketing person. But what I love about catalog inserts the most is you get a ton of bang for your buck because they never go away. As long as the title is in Edelweiss, you have that insert, that banner ad above it, and you can replace it as many times as you want. So if you wanted to have one image that generates pre-publication buzz, talks about it's coming up, and then once it's published, you could replace that with another one if you wanted to, or if it wins an award, you could replace it later on, or if the movie is made on that book, you could replace it with that. So you get a ton out of that. It's kind of a nice way to draw attention to those titles in your catalog that you want to pay special attention to, that you think are going to do really well, or you really want to push to kind of generate some buzz. So that was a lot of possibilities just related to highlighting your title with an Edelweiss. But there are many other ways to generate pre-publication buzz. Review copies is probably one of the industry's favorites, and that's because it just works so well. And I'm going to pass it over to Joe for this part because he spends a lot of time talking to our publisher clients about how they use digital, but also print review copies. And, Joe, I think one thing maybe to start with is why are there both, and how do people use both?
Well, I think that the simple answer is you basically are choosing a vehicle that if you are a reviewer, a librarian, a bookseller, you're able to choose the vehicle that works best for you. If you prefer just to quickly digest books through digital, a digital medium, then the digital copies are good. On the other hand, if you really prefer print, as many people still do, then a print copy is what you want to choose. So giving people options, I think, is the reason why publishers use both. And we're kind of going to go through this. We'll talk about the digital because they're more economical. We'll talk about those first, and then we'll move on to the print. Digital copies are really, because they're less expensive, publishers tend to share them more widely with their audience. And while it's hard to measure the true impact of review copies for a publisher, there's a reason why they're used so pervasively, and that's because they work. An analysis of our data at Treeline shows that $1 invested in review copies translates to about $5 in sales. And earlier this year, we had a webinar with panelists from Norton and HarperCollins to talk about how they use review copies to generate pre-publication buzz. And here's some of the things that they suggested. First and foremost was to know your target audience and who can influence those folks. Now, this may differ for different roles within your publishing house. Say sales reps, they may be focused more on the booksellers, while marketing has an eye on media and librarians, for example. Another tip to get the most out of review copies is to consider the requests. Now, when Edelweiss users request a DRC, they have to know why they are requesting it. Is it for an acquisition, to advocate, course adoption, or review? And then they have to leave a note. So you can also access their profile, which gives you really helpful information about when determining if their access will help you meet your goals for that title. So their profile strength in Edelweiss is based on how much of their profile they've completed, and that involves role summary, profile pic, description of their role, affiliations, links to social media, etc. Now, the bottom line is serious folks take time to complete this fully. And also pay attention to what they've written in their profile. Does it say how they promote books? Is there a link to their website or social media? What kind of an email address are they using? Do they submit review copies, reviews, and feedback? If it's someone you know you're always going to approve, go ahead and whitelist them. In other words, zero in on the requester's role and intent. One way to get started is to sort requests by type of book professional. And when you approve their request, don't forget to make a request of your own. Let them know that what you'd love for them to do after they read your book. And in many cases, this is just asking them to leave a review in Edelweiss, nominating the title Indie Next or Library Reads. And if they enjoy the book, ask them to consider buying it. And here are just a few more to run through. Defaults are your friend because they save you time. If you have a generic message you want included in all email responses, save it in your default preferences. The share tool in Edelweiss allows you to pre-approve a group of readers that you've created in Edelweiss, and then generate an email with a link, and in one click, send a review copy to the entire group. Use the quick send feature to send a pre-approved link to someone who requests a DRC. And definitely delegate. If you have a small team or you're an army of one, time is your greatest resource. So delegate approvals to people in your organization. Now, we can't cover all of the best practices mentioned in that particular webinar, but you can check it out if you're interested. You can find all of our webinars, particularly the ones that we've done in the last year, in Edelweiss just by clicking on the help button in the upper right-hand corner of Edelweiss. Select Get Help, and then you'll see a tab for the webinars. So we're going to jump over to print review copies. Now, we were referring to them to print review copies, but in the industry, they've always been referred to as advanced reader copies or ARCs. And the reason we just are using print review is to distinguish from digital review copies. So the acronym we've been using is PRCs. So when you hear me use the term PRCs, I'm referring to print review copies, which are the same thing as the advanced reader copies. And they've been part of publishers in the trade sector for certainly part of their marketing strategy for years. And managing PRCs is a challenge. We've, you think about it, you've printed hundreds of PRCs, and you've overestimated how many you'd need, so you had to throw some away. Or on the other hand, you ran out too soon and didn't have enough when you needed them. And we've heard from years from publishers, particularly since we introduced the digital review copy module, that they'd like to be able to manage their print review copies in the same place as their digital review copies. So we're really excited to add PRCs to our review copy module. So now we're going to dig into kind of the PRC module and answer some of the questions you might have about how it works. So as I just mentioned, sending PRCs to reviewers and buyers is an age-old way to generate pre-publication buzz. In fact, we found that publishers spend on average about 22% of their marketing budget on them. The challenge with the current process that most publishers deploy is that they usually find themselves managing their print review copies based on supply. It's not unusual for reps or the marketing folks to state the number of PRCs they'll need for an upcoming list several months prior to the selling season for that list. They then end up distributing their allotment based on supply, not demand. Books that make their way to a rep's car, they may or may not find their way to an interested reader, and they could very well end up going from the back seat to the recycling bin. You know, it's very high handling costs and very wasteful. We recently introduced an ordering mechanism in Edelweiss Plus for PRCs, and the process we developed was designed to address the needs publishers have been sharing with us. Last fall, we surveyed our publisher clients to make sure we really understood the challenges they grappled with when it comes to PRCs. And cost was reported to be the biggest challenge, and that's not a surprise. But reducing waste wasn't far behind. And in fact, the vast majority of publisher respondents estimated they ended up throwing away at least 10% of the books they had printed. And for some, it was as high as 50%. So improving the process to ensure PRCs to get to the right people was also high on the list. Being able to measure success and managing the process from an operational perspective were also critical needs that we heard. So the solution we created in Edelweiss allows you, the publisher, to work in a demand model. Reps and accounts can request PRCs when they need them, not several months in advance, and have them delivered directly to an interested party. Reps or even their accounts are able to place their orders in Edelweiss Plus, and they don't have to open a separate application to place that order. And this allows both publishers and reps to maintain minimal inventory. Reps can choose to order PRCs delivered to buyers ahead of their on-site sales visits, or they can send them as a follow-up item. It's easy to implement, easy to manage, and easy to monitor. So as for the need to cut costs, we project the savings of anywhere from 20 to 50% for most publishers. And so in other words, it's about moving to a just-in-time model and improving efficiency across the process. And if you look at this chart before you, these cost estimates, are based on a supply model where books are sent to a rep, and then the rep distributes those books. So there's double handling, there's that waste that I referenced earlier, and that model is compared to this print-on-demand model that we're talking about here. So the economics are really clear, and with print review copies taking a big chunk of a publisher's budget, managing your PRCs within Edelweiss can free up money to promote titles in other ways. So one best practice to share related to print review copies is to be very intentional about who you give one to and what you expect them to do with it. You decide who can see that a PRC is available, and you decide who can receive a PRC. PRCs are a promotional tool, and they're well worth it, but it's best for you to use your money wisely. If you manage your print review copies in Edelweiss, many of the best practices for digital review copies can be applied to PRCs because the management process is pretty much the same. So we're now going to switch gears a bit, and Sarah is going to wrap up the session by touching on a few other marketing tactics that you can deploy in Edelweiss Plus. Sarah?
All right. Okay, so far we've talked about how to draw attention to your titles in the catalog in Edelweiss, and also how to reach influencers with print or digital review copies. And there's one last bucket of ways to promote your pre-publication titles. It's a pretty big bucket, and that's through marketing, such as advertisements, social media, email campaigns. This is actually probably what most folks think about when they think about promoting the titles, but it's really just the icing on the cake. There's a reason why we put this at the end of this webinar, because when you have a strong foundation, you have those robust title listings, you have well thought out catalogs, you have review copies, then your other marketing efforts are just that much stronger and more effective. So some of the marketing opportunities you probably manage in-house, and some you can partner with in Edelweiss. So newsletters, for example, are a great way to promote your title, and I'm sure you've used them. It doesn't have to break the bank either. There are lots of options available to you. So depending on your goal or target audience, some newsletters or publications probably make more sense than others. I bet if we were to take a poll right now of, have you tried newsletters and which ones, people would, there might not even be a trend. People are, there's so many out there. So if, for example, of course, I'm talking about the Edelweiss newsletters because that's one thing that I work on at Above the Tree Line. The picture here is the weekly newsletters, and this, I'm sure you receive it. It highlights what's new in Edelweiss in the past week. It is actually really popular with our users. People wait for it on Tuesday afternoons. It goes to over 70,000 book professionals in the US, Canada, and Australia, others that have self-subscribed. If we're a little late in sending it, people let us know. They want to make sure they get it. It does include text-only listings of review copies and catalogs posted in the past week for free. So if you are a catalog subscriber or a review copy subscriber, your new stuff is automatically listed in here. But one thing that we started doing, it's probably earlier this year, I think it was in early February, is offering featured titles. And this actually gets 11 times the number of clicks. Those are those images that you see on the top there, where it has the jacket cover, it has some title information, the first 500 characters of the summary. And so that's been very effective for publishers who have a title that they want to push a little bit more than others. You can also grab the top banner spot to highlight your new title to this large audience. And what's really cool is you can select either of those options just by clicking the promote little megaphone icon that you see there. That's in your title listings you see if you are an admin, and you can just go and it leads you through the process right there. Of course, you can always email us. It will probably come to me and I'd be happy to answer your questions about that. We have another type of newsletter, and that is role-specific newsletters. And this might be something that you've had success with as well. So if you're looking to target booksellers, librarians, reviewers, then you want, a specific type of newsletter. In fact, you guys are probably familiar with the publisher newsletter. It's probably how you heard about this webinar. So we have other role-specific newsletters, and they're just how we highlight relevant content that really is just of interest to a specific group. Product updates, events, training tips. So if you ever want to reach librarians in particular, or reviewers or booksellers specifically with a promotional campaign that you're doing, these can be a great option, and you can purchase a banner ad in these. It goes out once a month on a Thursday. So we actually just sent the reviewer newsletter out today. So newsletters are a popular tactic, not just those with Edelweiss. Like you probably, I subscribe to a ton of industry newsletters. Many of you likely advertise in library or bookseller specific publications, or those that are aimed at certain genre reviewers, for example. They're just a really great way to reach engaged readers who can spark some interest in your titles before and after the publication. I know that when we send a newsletter out, we immediately get clicks on it, we get interest in things. I see things over on Twitter, people are talking about titles that they just saw pop up in the newsletter. They're just an effective way to get the word out. And it's of course worth mentioning all the other tactics that your marketing department can do to generate buzz for your titles. So for example, if you have a review copy in Edelweiss, share a pretty image of it on Twitter with a link back to the title listing in Edelweiss. That sounds so obvious, and yet I manage our Twitter account and I don't see a lot of it, and it's super effective. Bookish Twitter is just very active, and reviewers are out there, librarians in particular. And so generating some interest there. I mean, if you went and did all of the work to make that title listing beautiful and super helpful, then definitely, share that and do everything you can to draw traffic back to that listing. Just a way to expand your reach, draw more attention to that awesome work that you did, than we talked about earlier. And if you tag, here's a little just tip, if you tag Vice Squad, I will try to retweet it for you as well. So similarly, I mean, you no doubt have your own list of accounts or media contacts, and you communicate with them through email blasts, your own newsletters, your own personal outreach. The more you can do to drive traffic back to that listing, the better. You can even use the share feature in Edelweiss that makes sending a link to your review copies to your contacts super simple. Honestly, we could spend a lot of time talking about these, but I bet you know more about this bucket right here than I do. So I'll stick to what I know and the Edelweiss tactics that can help. But definitely, I want to end with this slide because it is so important for that work that you do to create that strong foundation, to do everything you can to just share that and expand your reach so that it's worthwhile, and just maximize that effort in return. So that was a lot. We hope it sparked some ideas for you, maybe some questions. If you have questions about things we talk about, feel free to enter it into chat right now, or Q&A, either one. I will check that. I will email you back. You can, of course, always email our awesome support team at support@abovethetreeline.com, and they will track down the answer. Maybe they'll pass it over to me, and I might get back to you. And if you want to see more details on a lot of the promotional tactics that we talked about, you can go to this URL here and download a pretty little media and promotional guide. It's a PDF that has lots of nitty-gritty details about some of the promotional tactics that we talked about that you can do that are included in your subscription, and also those that you can do to advertise and expand your reach. So with that, Joe, did I forget anything?
No, we covered it all and covered it very well. Thank you.
All right, and we hit our goal. We were trying to aim for about a half hour because I know you guys are busy people. But definitely reach out. I'm gonna keep the webinar open for a while, just so if you have a question burning right now, put it in there, and it'll save you a step, and I'll reach back out to you. But if you are tomorrow thinking through things, or your next season thinking through things, and you have questions or ways that you can just get more out of Edelweiss and just leverage what you're doing here, definitely reach out to us. So thank you for your time. I hope you have a great afternoon.